Good evening, everybody. My name is Rainer. This is Rainier Books. I'm a German booktuber living in Stockholm, Sweden, and I'm talking about books mostly written in English or translated into the English language. It is Tuesday tomorrow, and tomorrow I'm going to publish this video. Tuesday is the 26th of October, and this is like 5 days before November starts. And November, as you all know, is also called Non-Fiction November on BookTube. And today I have for you the 10 titles you have to read during Non-Fiction November. Let's start the video. I thought that this year the 10 books that I'm going to show you, that I'm going to speak about for Non-Fiction November, should all be books that I own, should all be books from my shelves, should all be books that I have read. This is something also from the back catalog. These are not 10 books that were published in 2021, but these are 10 books that I really would highly recommend you to read and get your hands on. Get them from the library, get them from an independent bookstore, or buy them wherever you can, and support the authors and support the publishers and the bookstores. The first one is a book about Native American life. It is a book of an author who has not only written one book about Native American life, but many of them. He has written a lot of articles. He's spending his time between Los Angeles in California and the Leech Lake Reservation in Minnesota. I'm talking about David Treuer, and his book is called Res Life. Res Life, and if you know Res, R-E-Z is the abbreviation of the reservation, life on the reservation, and that is what he is describing here. The Indian reservations in Minnesota and Wisconsin. There's a map also in this book, and there are a lot of people depicted that Treuer has met and that mean a lot to him. I think also his family figures in that book. It's a great account of Native American life today. And here's a map that shows you the 300 Indian reservations that are existing in the United States. Most of them are west of the Mississippi, as you can see. This book was published by Grove Press in 2012 and is a very good jump in if you are interested in Native American life. Res Life by David Treuer. The second book I got, I think, did I buy this in Portland? In Oregon? I did. Yeah, I see the at Powell's. This is a very Portlandish book. This is called Death Confetti, Pickers, Pungs, and Transit Ghosts in Portland, Oregon by Jennifer Robin, with this beautiful cover. It was published also, I think, in the 2010s. Let me take a look. Published by Feral House in 2018 by Jennifer Robin. And she is apparently a very well-known person in the city of Portland. And she is talking about other famous persons of the alternative culture life in the city of Portland, Oregon. In this one, Death Confetti, Pickers, Punks, and Transit Ghosts in Portland, Oregon. Another book that I love, I have recommended this book to a lot of friends, to a lot of acquaintances, to almost everyone who's ever been to London, England. And many people have bought the book, and I'm very happy to say that I also know a couple of Londoners, people who have moved to London, not original Londoners, but like everybody else almost, they have moved to London and they have recommended this book to other Londoners. So it must be good, right? This is Ben Judah's book with a very simple title, This is London. That's how the BBC actually started their broadcasts many years ago. I heard that from, for example, the Second World War, the people in Germany who would listen to BBC News to get more news from the other side. They listened to the BBC and they were always sort of coming with the same kind of saying every hour. It's 6 p.m. This is London. This is London by Ben Judah. This is not news from all over the world. It's the stories you never hear and the people you never see. This is such a great book by this British journalist. This is London, Life and Death in the World City. It shows us, it shows you the place where many migrants from all over the world arrive in London. That's the first chapter. It's Victoria Coach Station. It goes to a lot of places where I have been. I have actually traveled using this book to see some of the most diverse places in London, like Peckham High Street. I've been to Peckham. I've been on Peckham High Street. Peckham is a very Afro-Caribbean part of London. I've been to Neaston Lane, to Peshawar, London. I've been, of course, to Elephant and Castle, to Hammersmith and City, White City, and all the districts that Judah is mentioning in this book. He has actually traveled with the black people who travel at 5 o'clock in the morning from Elephant and Castle to clean the subway, to clean the underground from the most disgusting things that you can imagine, from human feces, from blood, from everything. He has worked together with Romanian workers on the black market, and he has been with all the different kinds of immigrants and talked to them, listened to their stories, and he tells them in this amazing collection, This is London. If you want to go to London, if you love London, you should absolutely read this book. Number 4 is a memoir, an autobiography. It is from a journalist from the United States. I think she's writing for The New Yorker, mostly about tech in the United States, the tech industry. She was a young woman working in the literary business in New York, realizing in her mid-20s that working in the literary business in New York as an assistant, as actually the black girl in Zakiya Delilah Harris's novel, the other black girl won't give you a lot of money. You get basic health insurance, but you are not able to eat the posh sandwiches that your boss is eating. So Anna Wiener decided to move to the West Coast, to move to Silicon Valley, to move to the tech industry, where 95% of the people who worked there were men when she arrived there. And she worked in Silicon Valley, which she is calling the Uncanny Valley in her great memoir. I really love this book. It taught me a lot about a certain species of people in the US who are very young, who are working in startups, who are believing in capitalism, and who are earning a hell of a lot of money. How they look upon the world and how they look at women is described in Uncanny Valley by Anna Wiener. We are traveling again in this video. We're traveling far, far east from the Uncanny Valley, from the Silicon Valley. We are traveling over Europe. We're traveling into Asia, and we are traveling to a country that people sometimes describe as one of the most dangerous countries in the whole wide world. I'm talking about Pakistan. And Declan Walsh, an Irish journalist who has worked also for the New York Times for many years as a correspondent, and also for The Guardian in Pakistan. Declan Walsh, I think he was expelled from Pakistan. He had to leave the country many years ago, but now, a couple of years after he had to leave the country, he has written a marvelous book about Pakistan. It's called The 9 Lives of Pakistan by Declan Walsh, non-fiction book. It's called Dispatches from a Divided Nation. And I've read this book. He describes the biographies of 9 Pakistani lives. Some of them are still with us. Some of them have been killed in attacks and terrorist attacks. But all of them are important or carry a bit of the history of the country. And if you want to understand a little bit more about Pakistan, but also about the neighboring Afghanistan or India, you should absolutely read The 9 Lives of Pakistan by Declan Walsh. And we're halfway through now. 5 books left in the top 10 books that you have to read in Nonfiction November. We're traveling again. We're taking another airplane from Karachi. or from Islamabad, from Pakistan, and we're traveling east again, if that's possible. Yes, it is. It is possible. I think, I don't know, 3 hours or 4 hours probably east of Pakistan. What could you imagine would be lying there if you're crossing into Russia to Kamchatka and then over the, the Japanese Sea, you travel to the beautiful country of Japan. And Christopher Harding is a historian who has written a marvelous penguin book, a masterly book about Japan. It's called Japan's Story in Search of a Nation from 1850 to present. He is describing the history, the most important parts of the history of this country that is such a quizzical thing, such so fascinating and so difficult to understand at times when you come there. When I traveled to Tokyo for the first time 6 years ago, I read a travel guide, and I always remember the first sentence that this travel guide was telling me, and this was, if you want to see a little bit how the future of the world looks like, well, get on a plane and travel to Tokyo. And yeah, I think it's very much true, because I saw a lot of things that are unthinkable in Europe. Technology, social life, and a lot of things that we don't understand. There's the government in Japan, which has almost always been the same party after the Second World War. And still we call it a functioning and beautiful democracy, but it's always the same kind of people. It is a society where men still define what is happening. But on the other side, there's so much beautiful culture and such an ancient history. It is fascinating. Japan's Story by Christopher Harding is definitely also a recommendation, and hopefully we can travel to Japan again one of these years to come. A book that that really made me cry when I read it early this year in 2021 is about the homelessness in the UK. I have been in the UK almost every year before the pandemic for like a streak of 10 years. And what I have realized, especially when I was in Brighton, at the Brighton by the Sea, in Sussex, and in London in 2019, was that I had no statistics, I had no real proof for that, but I saw and I had the gut feeling that more people are homeless than ever before on the streets of Britain in 2019. And people called out to me and cried for help and wanted money, of course, and other help, and in a way that has never happened before. So when Maeve McClenahan published her book, No Fixed Abode, Life and Death Among the UK's Forgotten Homeless, I immediately ordered it. And Maeve McClenahan has written a book that hopefully gets her awards, because she has really done a great research in this book where she tells a lot of stories of homeless people in the UK, about people fighting homelessness and also why there is such a great homelessness in the United Kingdom, and how it will change after Brexit, which has left the country in turmoil. We have seen the pictures of empty shelves in supermarkets. We have seen the pictures where they really have a lack of thousands of drivers that they have sent home to their home countries after Brexit, and people are out of their jobs. So there is a risk, at least for a short time, coming for even more homelessness on the streets of the UK. Maeve McClenahan's book is great. It's absolutely necessary to read this. Something completely different. Now we're not traveling. We're all around the world, because what I'm talking now is, I think, all around the world, except for Antarctica, except for the Sahara. If you are interested, if you have a pet at home, it's probably either a dog or a cat. And so few people who know so much about dogs and about cats as the British biologist and researcher from the University of Bristol, Mr. John Bradshaw. And I would highly recommend, if you are a dog owner, if you love doggies, please read In Defense of Dogs by John Bradshaw. It's a wonderful, marvelous book about man's best friend, as he's often called, as dogs are often called. Nothing more to say. We come to a book that also is important in our times when democracy is at stake, when democracy is something that we no longer see as the natural state rule in a country. Democracy is questioned like never ever before. Right now, the United States are struggling with China, and China is trying to impose its picture of the world, which is definitely a non-democratic one, showing that it's possible to have prosperity, to get rich, to make progress, even without having democracy, without having human rights in your country. We have come to a period of time when the European Union has huge problems, not only with Brexit. Brexit is almost dead and gone. It's almost forgotten. But when we have problems within the European Union with basically two countries right now which have governments that are neglecting the European values of human rights. And these are Hungary and Poland, of course. And Poland is the country where the next author's husband comes from. Anne Applebaum, an American journalist, one of the most well-known American journalists. Anne Applebaum, who's also British, she's British and American. She has a Polish husband, she has a lot of connections to Poland, and she describes in her current book, Twilight of Democracy, the seductive lure of authoritarianism, a tendency towards what she calls the seductive lure of authoritarianism, Trumpism in the United States, neglecting facts, neglecting science, neglecting minorities or even large minorities' rights is very in today, and it's very dangerous, of course, for our countries. And Applebaum is really dissecting that in this pretty small book. It takes you about 4 or 5 hours to read this, and it's really worthwhile. The last book, last but not least, and the 10 books that you got to read for Non-Fiction November, my friends, is, of course, who could it be? Who could it be other than someone who is from Harvard University, a sociologist from Harvard University? I'm talking about Matthew Desmond and his book that won the Pulitzer a couple of years ago. And I've also bought this book in Portland, so that's a good come back to the start of this, right? I bought this book at Powell's some years ago, and it really broke my heart, as Maeve McClenahan's book did. This is Evicted, Poverty and Profit in the American City by Matthew Desmond, where he describes the life and problems of a bunch of mostly black Afro-American families living in the city of Milwaukee in Wisconsin over, I think, during the year of 2011, when he has studied, when he has researched the problem of eviction in the United States, taking Milwaukee as his example, his exemplifier, where he says that you can see all the patterns that are occurring everywhere in the country. And there are a lot of sentences, a lot of things in this book that really make you think, that really give you a punch in the face, a punch in your stomach, when Desmond, for example, says in his book here in Evicted that about he says that black men are incarcerated and black women get evicted and end up homeless on the street. Lots of families who get evicted over the course of this year, and how Desmond is drawing conclusions from that. He's also talking to owners, to landlords, and landlords who are actually making money by evicting people, landlords who prefer tenants who get evicted like every 3 or 4 months because they have developed a system that this sort of gives them even more profit. This is horrible, and this is also very, very necessary, because it's a problem that is still existing in the US. I just saw, before filming this video, I just saw something on YouTube, a couple of videos about homelessness in Philadelphia and in Portland and in Los Angeles and in San Francisco. Homelessness is still growing, it's still getting bigger. The problem is exploding in San Francisco. I hear that people who have lived there for 30 years, for 35 years say today in 2021, it has never been that bad. So Evicted by Matthew Desmond is a super important read, like all of these 10 books are. All of these 10 books are super important. Please tell me in the notes down below, in the comments down below, if you have read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or maybe all of these 10 books, and what did you think about them? Please tell me what you are reading in Nonfiction November. I am interested in that. Nonfiction is a very important and very good and very wide genre, of course. And next year I'm going to present you a different list, I promise. But this year, 10 books from my shelves, 10 books that you gotta read. Thanks very much for watching this video, and I hope that you stay tuned to the channel. But most of all, please, stay safe. Bye-bye.